but we'll get the meeting started. It's 12:01 on my clock. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance at the weekly meeting for the Rotary Club of Wausau. Any announcements, Deb, that you have on your list? I don't have any right now, and then we can open up if other folks have them as well. But
the only thing is I sent Andrew and I talked about the schedule. Everybody's been assigned a spot. If you hadn't signed up before for a spot to get a speaker, we've assigned. So I sent an email out this morning to everyone to click on that, to take a look at the date you're assigned to help find a speaker. Andrew is most helpful in helping find speakers if you're having trouble with that, or if you need to switch or anything. The instructions are all there. And we're working on, I don't see Andrew on yet, but we're also working on our 5th Monday event on the 31st to be roadside cleanup. So we can have some actually face-to-face social distance activity together. So more details to come the next day.
Yeah, more details to come on the 31st. And then just to remind everybody, what we're doing is we're having speakers 3 out of 4 months, essentially, in a typical month. And then the week where we have a board meeting, we'll just have that conversation with the club members without an outside speaker. So that's what you'll see on that calendar. Okay. Other announcements. John Townsend, I see you're there, and I saw some email correspondence this morning. Probably not much of an update, but maybe you can update us on the district grant funding that we're applying for with the early birds.
Well, I guess my announcement would be is that we did complete the application for the $2,500 grant along with the Early Bird Club. So just as we did last time, but for a larger sum, that was submitted. My note, I think, back to Jennifer Havel, who is the grants chair for the Early Bird Club, was to determine if she's heard back yet from our district Rotary Foundation chair and whether or not that's been awarded yet. I don't know, Matt, if you have heard anything or not. But anyway, since last we met, that grant has been submitted, and we did get an acknowledgement that it was received. So, Jeff, we're looking forward to working with you and Ben, maybe, and the distribution of those funds and even larger amounts than we had last time. So we think that'll be really special.
Okay, thanks, John. Other announcements. Dennis Tan, do you have anything from district level with your new role, or are you still getting your sea legs there?
I'm still getting my feet wet a little bit. We have a board meeting coming up, and then we'll go from there. All I know is this, and I'm also in the district conference committee as well. So my understanding is that the dual con this year is pushed out to next year, and then after that, I think we're having a tri-con after that for 2022. So there's a tri-district conference in 2022.
Okay.
But as far as public image goes for the district, I'll have more information once after the board meeting.
Okay. Patrick, I see you there. Any updates from your perspective?
No, other than, I'm just tickled that we were able to meet our goal. And so let's see, we raised $3,325.
That's great.
So thanks to everybody that supported it.
Yeah, good.
We're going to have a Hunger Plus committee meeting right after this meeting to talk about what can we do to make our third quarter event even better.
All right, good deal. I think I've mentioned this to the full club before. I have to catch up on some emails here. The early birds are trying to organize a what's being called a Pints for Polio event sometime this fall. Now, there's some assumptions in there about, you know, social distancing and everything else, but the idea is, you know, raising money for, you know, for the Rotary International Foundation to combat polio, and have some fun doing it with some beer drinking at it looks like Bull Falls is going to be the likely location. So there's been some preliminary conversation about that. Dave Anderson is trying to get sort of a subcommittee together that meets here in the next week or so. I'm going to sit in on that. If there are other club members who are interested in participating and maybe helping to organize that, you know, shoot me a quick note, and be happy to include you or get you kind of to be the point person. I think the structure that they're thinking about is more than just us and the early birds, but also including Anago, Merrill, and Stevens Point. So more of a central Wisconsin kind of idea. So Pat's already reached out to those folks, and so that's in the early stages of organization. If you're interested in participating, let me know. Okay, any other announcements that anybody's got? Okay, we'll shift gears then to happy and sad dollars. Tanya, how about leading the charge for us on the happy and sad dollars today?
Sure thing. I'm going to start with sad dollars because then we'll end on a happy note. So any sad dollars? All right. Well, I guess that's good. How about happy dollars?
I'm sorry, I was typing a response to somebody. I'm going to throw in a sad dollar. I lost a really close friend that I've known since I went to Trinity as a little kid. That we've been close, a group of us, since we were 6 years old, and he passed away last week. So I'm going to put in $1 for my friend Ross.
Oh, sorry about that, Debbie. Any other sad dollars? Okay, happy dollars.
I've got a happy dollar for our Hunger Plus campaign.
Great. Well, I don't usually speak up, so I'll do like happy $10. We are planning for many staycations due to the current situation, so we added a hot tub to our backyard this past weekend, so it's been a nice addition. And then on the heels of that, I won't be here next Monday because I'm going on a rustic camping vacation on the shores of Lake Superior. So I have a really good couple of weeks. Anyone else for happy dollars?
I'll throw in a jealous happy dollar for you, Tanya, because I love Lake Superior. I want my ashes spread on Lake Superior. So, I mean, yeah, so I'll throw in a jealous happy dollar for you because it's gorgeous up there.
I agree. I'm with you.
This is Jean. I have a happy 3. The first 2 are attaboys. I want to thank Sean and Matt for keeping this pub going with your leadership during the Zoom situation that we've been going through. So I just want to thank you both for your leadership in keeping this going. So those are 2 attaboys. And I want to put in a happy dollar for Ben Bliven as our speaker today. He does such a tremendous job with his team, and we're so grateful to the Wausau Police Department for all that you do for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome.
Other
anyone else?
I'll put in a happy dollar. Excuse me. Thank you, Jean. Appreciate it. But I'm happy that on Friday night we put on our first show since March 13th. It was really wonderful to put on a show again. over at the Grand on Tour at Whitewater Music Hall. It was a wonderful night, nice socially distanced outdoor crowd, a great band from Oshkosh, and really was weather couldn't have been better. So it's been a long 5 months, but it was a nice evening to have that. First of 10. So we only need 9 more nights of really good weather between now and October.
Thanks, Sean.
We need more than that, Sean.
Sure.
Any other happy dollars?
I'll throw in a happy dollar too. As many of you know, I started my own business, right? And I'm happy that I managed to get my first client last week. So really happy about that. And
Nice.
more to come. So yeah, that's my happy dollar.
Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else? Happy dollars.
Tanya, last week I missed recognizing Lisa Dodson, who I think might have been attending last week, at least audibly, but she had, I think the week prior to that, conducted their first virtual white coat ceremony to welcome the new class of Medical College of Wisconsin, Central Wisconsin med students. And so kudos to her for her ingenuity in making that special event the formal kickoff of their 3-year career at the medical college a success.
Great. Thanks, John. Anybody else? Just a few more and we'll have everyone. Going once. Wave your hands in the air if you're happy. You want to put some dollars in. Twice. All right. Back to you, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Tanya.
You're welcome.
Okay. Time now to introduce our speaker, Rosemary. I think the floor is yours to introduce our speaker for today.
Well, I don't have a lot to say, no bio. I just want to welcome Chief of Police Wausau, Ben Bliven, and thank him very much for speaking to us. Take it away, Ben.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. When the emails were being thrown around about me coming to speak, our Deputy Chief Matt was involved in that. He said that the word esteemed police chief would be used, and so I'm a little disappointed in that, but I'll get through it. So I have talking points that I'll go through in regards to the mayor's task force on policing that's been in the media a lot lately, and is really an outcome of the uprising and the discussions nationally around George Floyd's death in Minneapolis. So I'm happy to talk about that, but when I talk to a group like this, I know that there's often a lot of things that you guys have questions about in regards to policing in our community. So before I get into that, I just want to address anything that's of concern to you or of interest to you. So I can talk all day probably about the policing task force, but I want to talk to you about things that are important to you. So I'll throw it out there to questions first or comments in regards to policing if you want me to talk about anything beyond the mayor's task force first.
I think my question for you is, how's morale with all of this that's been going on? I mean, it's a lot of pressure and a lot of fear in some cases, probably.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really good question. And I think morale, I would say, is okay considering all that's going on in the world. I think morale had been lower than normal because of the COVID situation and all of the precautions we took in the safer at home order earlier this year that lasted for a couple of months, which was really a difficult time for everybody in society, in our community. And that includes our police officers. And we were on an emergency policing schedule for about 3 months, which impacted people negatively. But we thought it was the right thing to do and important to keep our officers as healthy as possible, not knowing what exactly COVID was and what the impact of COVID might be. So I think the morale was relatively low, and then then George Floyd's death happened. And, you know, since then, I don't think it's any secret that there has been a lot of eyes on law enforcement and how we go about our work and how we hire and how we make sure we maintain accountability within law enforcement, how we use force, how, you know, whether or not we should even have a police force, you know, in the defunding discussion. You know, we've seen a lot of defunding nationally. You know, Seattle has just voted, their city council reduced the police budget by 14%, which is about 100 police officers in Seattle. Austin, Texas just reduced their police force, I think, by 30% or 35% was the budget cut there, which has to be hundreds of police officers. And you know, we haven't seen or heard the discussion here about reducing our budget or defunding police. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of discussion around law enforcement tactics and law enforcement profession locally. So, you know, that it has been a difficult year for law enforcement. You know, one of my biggest concerns around the morale is retention of police officers for sure. But in addition to that, we have to think about recruiting police officers. And, you know, it's been difficult over the last 5 or 6 years to recruit police officers. And so I think it's just going to get more difficult to bring good people that we want to have serving as police officers into our community and into our profession. So that's certainly something that's on our mind a lot as well. So I would say morale is okay, but you know, it's a tough time for sure to be a police officer with all of the scrutiny that is on us. And you know, I think that's kind of where you know, the mayor's task force, I hope, can be something that's positive that comes out of all of the scrutiny on law enforcement, at least within the city of Wausau on a local level. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about the task force, and if you guys have questions or you want to talk about something else, feel free to pipe in. First of all, let's talk a little bit about what is the task force and why are we moving forward with that. You know, like I said, with the in the aftermath of the George Floyd death in Minneapolis, Mayor Rosenberg and I, you know, we've had a lot of discussions around you know, certain things nationally that have been thrown out there as things that we in law enforcement should be doing. An example of that is the 8 Can't Wait movement. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with what that is, but the 8 Can't Wait movement is, it's a set of policies, 8 policies that this organization is recommending for all law enforcement agencies in the country because it will reduce the amount of fatal uses of force within law enforcement. And so a few of those things that they're recommending are requiring police officers to de-escalate situations prior to utilizing force, implement policies for duty to intervene or intercede. So in the case of George Floyd and Officer Derek Chauvin, you'll recall that there were 3 other officers on scene, and a lot of the criticism of those other 3 officers is that they didn't intervene as Derek Chauvin had his knee on the neck of George Floyd for almost 9 minutes. And so that's what the duty to intervene or duty to intercede policy would say, is that officers that are on scene and are seeing another officer behaving in a way that is outside of policy or that is unnecessary use of force, that they have a duty to intercede, and if they don't, there will be discipline up to and including termination that comes out of that use of force or lack of intervening. So that's a policy that's recommended. Requiring somebody to give verbal warning prior to firing a shot, firing your weapon. Having and implementing a use of force continuum. So you start at a low level use of force, and there's a continuum up to the last resort, which is using your firearm or deadly force. So those are a few of the 8 policies, and so, you know, as the mayor and I were talking about, you know, some of these discussions around 8 Can't Wait, I said, you know, I've been with the Wausau Police Department for over 20 years, and we've had all 8 of these policies implemented for the entire 20 years that I've worked here. We already do these things, so you know, that isn't something that we really need to even evaluate because we're already doing those things. And so we talked about, well, what can we do? What should we be doing as a police department? And part of our vision, our vision at the Wausau Police Department is to be regarded as the standard of excellence in policing. And the reason that we have that vision is because we know that we can always be better. Even if you're number one, you're a Super Bowl champion in football, you can still improve, right? You still make mistakes. There's still things that you can do better. And that's definitely true within policing, is we always have the opportunity to improve. So we wanted to involve the community, involve citizens in evaluating and talking to us about what their expectations are of law enforcement, and talking about potential policies and potential programs that we can implement here to do a better job in policing and try to you know, achieve our mission of excellence. And so that's kind of where the task force came from. And a lot of people ask me, like, how do I feel about it, you know, as the police chief? Do I think it's something that's important? Do I think it's something that's just a political thing that the mayor wants to do because it makes her look good? You know, and I get asked a lot of those questions, and I'm in full support of this. I think it's something that will challenge me and our police department, and I think it's something that's really important to our community. So I think our community really wants to know that the police department's doing the best we can, that we have the best policies in place. But I also think that if you look into our police department, the hearts and souls of the people that work here at Wausau PD, I think that every citizen in our community would be pleased. I think we have tremendous people here. I think we have excellent policies. We are among the few law enforcement agencies in the country that are accredited. We have great partnerships with Marathon County Sheriff's Department, North Central Healthcare, the women's community, United Way. I mean, all of the other community partners that we have great relationships with, and we work with those partners to help resolve community issues. I think the struggle and where we are today in terms of how we respond to mental health issues and homelessness issues and other social issues in our community is people see the results of mental health and alcohol and drug addiction, and the symptoms of that are people out on the street behaving poorly, just being disruptive, and so they don't know what to do or who to call, so they call us, and that's been going on for years. And so now we are at the point where, you know, police are looked at to resolve and solve these problems, but we're police officers, right? You know, our major role is the safety and security of our community, not necessarily to make sure that you know, an alcoholic gets to treatment, or make sure that somebody who has mental health issues is taking their medication. But those are the things that we are tasked with on a daily basis because of the calls for service that come in from our community. But that's where our partnerships come in. And, you know, so we have things that we put in place in previous years, like our crisis assessment response team, our CART team, which is a great partnership we have with North Central Healthcare. We have a crisis professional that works. I mean, you might even be able to see them if they stand up there outside my window. They're right behind me, and they respond to over 50% of the crisis calls that occur in our community. And that crisis professional from North Central Healthcare responds with a police officer, and often are the point of contact for starting that conversation for the people that are having mental health crisis in our community. And so, you know, we are a leader in the state, and I would say in the country, in how we respond to mental health issues. So I think one of the outcomes that we will see from this policing task force that the mayor has put in place is a better understanding of the work that our police department does to impact these issues that our community is facing in a positive way. And you'll see the policies that we have in place around use of force. You will see and understand how we evaluate and investigate citizen complaints against officers. People will understand the role of the Police and Fire Commission and citizen oversight of the police department, and that's a statutory thing that exists in our state. I think there's a lot of things that people don't know and understand about our police department that I hope is an outcome of the policing task force. You know, the members of the policing task force will be challenged because they have to understand the context of the discussion, which is, where are we today in terms of law enforcement? What policies exist? How do we hire? How do we hold people accountable? How do we fire people? What's our authority? You know, what policies do we have in place? What does accreditation mean? All of these things you have to understand if we're going to have a discussion about where we need to go to get better. You know, so, you know, I'm really in favor of this task force. I think it's going to be a good thing. The mayor has made the appointments to the task force, and if you want, I can tell you who's a part of that right now. The person who will be chairing the meetings is John Robinson. I'm sure many of you know John. He's a county board member and you know, very adept at leading meetings and discussions. So he's going to be the chair. The mayor wanted to have one city council member as a representative of the task force, and that's going to be Pat Peckham. We have 2 police and fire commissioners that are part of the task force. Those people will be Michael Loy and William Harris. And then we have 3 citizen representatives who will be Sarah Schneck, Mike Klemp North, and Kaylee McCauley. And so those are the 7 people that will make up this task force. And the first meeting hasn't yet been set, and you know, the agendas haven't been set, so we have some work to do there yet. I have a meeting with John Robinson on Thursday this week, so we can have a discussion about where at least I think that the committee should go. But it was very intentional that I am not a voting or acting member of the task force, but I will be rather kind of staff to the task force, so I'll be present at all the meetings. I can answer questions about current practices and policies, and I can engage in discussion when that's appropriate. So that's kind of the long and the short of what the task force is, how it came to be, and why we're doing it, and how I feel about it. I'll stop there and pause for a second. What questions, if any, or what comments, if any, do you guys have about the task force?
This is Kelly. I don't know if this is necessarily about the task force, but you talked about the accreditation. I'm not familiar with that in terms of police departments. Can you say a little bit more about who the accrediting body is and what all that involves?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So there are actually 2 accrediting bodies for law enforcement agencies in the state of Wisconsin. The first is a national body, which is CALEA. They are an accrediting body that governs any law enforcement agency in the country can go through a CALEA accreditation process. Wisconsin agencies typically go through a body called WILEAG, which is the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Accreditation Group. And the reason that body was created about a dozen years ago was because CALEA is very expensive to go through. If you can imagine, you know, a large agency like NYPD or LAPD, there's a lot of things that, you know, and standards that are created that don't necessarily apply to an agency our size. So Wisconsin created their own accrediting body and really modeled it after a lot of the policies that the national body uses. And so we have, I mean, when I started here in the year 2000, Chief Brandimore was talking about accreditation and working towards CALEA accreditation, which is that national standard. And so we just went through our second round of accreditation. We've been accredited since December of 2016. And what that really means is there are about 550 standards that we have to meet through WILEAG. And they set those standards based on best practice in our profession and what they deem to be that best practice. And so every 3 years they come into our building for 3 or 4 days, and it's our responsibility to show to them that we've met all of those 550 standards. And so we have a file cabinet. Actually, we have an electronic file cabinet now that has the standard that we have to meet. And then within that, each of the 3 years, we have to show them that we've done that. So an easy example is, we have to have a policy that says we have mandatory seatbelt use for police officers. That's one of the 550 standards. And so we have a file cabinet that says, here's the standard that we have to meet, and then we have to prove that we meet that standard. So that could be a body cam video that would show the officer putting their seatbelt on before they drive out of the parking lot, or something like that. Or it could be an officer that was involved in a crash, and then the crash report indicates that the officer was wearing a seatbelt. And then we have to do that for each of the 3 years, for each of the 550 standards. And then as part of that accreditation process, they'll do ride-alongs with our officers. They will question the officers about our policies and our practices and our procedures. They'll come and they'll talk to me about our internal investigation, internal affairs process, how I keep those things under lock and key, how we make sure what the flow of that internal process is, and all of those things. So we're really put under a microscope to make sure that we're not just that we say that we have the right policy in place, but that we're actually following those best practice procedures, and those are updated on a regular basis.
Ben, I've got a question, and I apologize because there's a question in here at the end, I'm sure, but I'm going to start with a story to kind of give context. All right. So my oldest daughter's 18. Before she was born, I recall going to the store where we were going to get car seats, and there was a big wall of car seats, and the expensive ones were on the left and the cheap ones were on the right. And as I often do, I kind of gravitated towards the middle, and then the salesperson came over and, long story short, by the time we left, we had bought one of the expensive ones, and it was, the sales pitch was some version of, if you care about the safety of your child, you want to buy one of these expensive car seats. Okay, so what does that have to do with this? Well, as I've thought about the George Floyd situation and this whole defund the police, movement, and I try to put myself in the shoes of those advocating it, I wonder if it's related in some ways, in that, and I recall years ago, I can't remember, and this may have been the county, there was some sort of local political battle over some kind of armored vehicle, as I recall, and basically, it was a similar kind of pitch, in the sense of, look, if you care about the safety of your community and the safety of the officers, the municipality or county or whatever it was should pony up. And that's a pretty good trump card to have, right? And so then I try to put myself in the shoes of people who are advocating maybe a view that's different from my own. And if you say, well, there's concern about kind of an increased militarization of police forces across the country, and maybe not locally, but how do you think about that? Am I on the right track in terms of what the issue is? How do you think about it? And how do you think we as a community can navigate that tension that's going to be inherent, I think, no matter what the task force comes up with, for example? And so there is a question in there somewhere. Hopefully it made sense, but.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute question, I think. And, I have a little bit of an issue with the term militarization of police. And that term really came from the 1033 program, which has been around for quite a while now. And it allows law enforcement agencies to get military grade equipment from the military to use in their own communities. And that's really where I think the militarization of police came from, that term. But I think the honest truth is, to talk about, armored vehicles, and do we need that, or, why do we have that as police officers? I mean, I can talk on both sides of that argument, but at the end of the day, I've seen that armored vehicle in use, right? March 22nd of 2017, we were able to safely to keep our police officers safe after Jason Weiland and 3 other community members were killed. We were able to take that person into custody, and that armored vehicle took rounds. And that isn't the only time that the armored vehicle has actually taken rounds and kept our officers safe. And so we're able to more safely take people into custody. At the same time, that isn't a vehicle that I want to see coming down my street, right? So I definitely understand that. And so, but I think the crux of what people talk about when they're talking about militarization of police is how police officers engage their community, either on a one-on-one basis or just generally, what is their perception of their police department within their community? And that's a culture thing within law enforcement. So every police department's different when it comes to culture. I think if you spent a week within the Wausau Police Department and then you spent the next week with Marathon County Sheriff's Department, it feels different. Neither's right or wrong. It's just different. You have different county board versus city council. You have Sheriff Parks is different than I am in a lot of ways. Our policies are different somewhat. Our histories are different. Our hiring philosophies are different. So you're gonna encounter different philosophies. So for me, as the police chief here in Wausau, I want people in our police department that will first and foremost treat every single person they come across with great respect, and they don't talk down to them. They will give them every second of time that they can to help them resolve their problems, whether it's a police problem or not. I want people who aren't going to be out in the community swearing. There are lots of law enforcement officers across the country who that's the typical is there's foul language that they give while they're out in their community, and that's just not okay. It's not acceptable. I want people who will take the time to talk through an issue and have not just take the time, but have the ability to communicate in an exceptional way that reduces the likelihood that they'll have to even use low levels of force. Those are all philosophies of law enforcement, as opposed to the more in your face type of military, what people perceive as military type of law enforcement. And so that's a culture issue that we have to change in law enforcement. And so, but every agency is different across the country. There's 19,000 law enforcement agencies in the country, and we all have different philosophies and feelings about how we should go about our work. There's a time and a place to be very autocratic and very command and control, but that's a very, very, very seldom should that be used. I mean, 0.1% of the time do we need to raise our voice and give very direct commands to people to make sure that they're in compliance and make sure people are safe. Every other time we should be treating people with great respect and have great conversations and help them resolve those problems. But that's a culture issue that I think is really at the crux of what people are experiencing and talking about in Minneapolis and in Milwaukee. A lot of large city law enforcement agencies have a different culture than we have here. And I think that causes them problems. If you go look at President Obama's 21st century policing report, where they gave about 120 recommendations to law enforcement agencies, to become a top tier law enforcement agency. And a lot of that revolves around culture. A lot of it revolves around culture and how we interact and how we hire the right people and make sure that we're keeping people accountable and removing people from law enforcement who shouldn't be in law enforcement. So that was kind of a long-winded answer. I hope I kind of got to your...
No, that's all right. Long-winded question too, so that's okay. Other questions for Ben?
Say, Ben, this is Pat. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Pat Snyder. You mentioned about the CART unit getting about 50% of your calls. Have you looked into maybe expanding CART? And if so, are there state grant funds available for that?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And I wish I was sitting next to you because it looks like you're in a pretty nice space there. Yes, we have talked about expanding that. Funding is definitely the important piece to that. North Central Healthcare is on board. They would like to supply more crisis professionals, but they're working actually on increasing the capabilities of their crisis professionals and increasing the educational levels of their crisis professionals to provide a better service to our community. And they've had a little bit of an issue with turnover within that position. So that's been one issue. The other issue is, we have, if we do that, we have to find, either remove a police officer from a patrol position and put them into that CART position, or add to our staff, or remove a detective, which, we're pretty lean on detectives anyway. So it's just a matter of finding the right balance for us. I'm definitely in favor of that. I'm not aware of state grant funds that would help us in that vein, but it is definitely something we've looked at. I mean, we've also looked at partnering with Marathon County Social Services to have a social worker work out of our building, because a lot of the calls that we go on involve, especially the drug-related calls, involve drug-endangered children or children that are, that need to be removed from the home. And so social workers they're our first go-to for that type of work. And so, it's a similar to the CART team, but having a social worker that has a great relationship and a great understanding of what we do, and then we have an officer that is paired with them that understands what a social worker needs to do. We're just much more efficient and effective in how we are able to support the parents of kids and to support the kids that are really in desperate need in our community. So that's just kind of something else that we're looking at doing. So yeah, money would be great from the state level, Pat. That's what I'm saying.
Ben, it's Jean Tehan. I'm just wondering, does NTC continue to have the police science program? And the second part of the question is that a good feeder? Where do you get trained officers from that you like to hire?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Jean. So yes, they still do have the police science program at NTC, and I wouldn't say that that's a feeder program for us in terms of recruitment. It is for some law enforcement agencies. We're one of the few law enforcement agencies that will pay somebody to go through the police academy or recruit school. So just to give you some context of what that means is, you have to have 60 college credits in Wisconsin to become a police officer. It doesn't have to be in anything specific. Matt Barnes's degree is in communications. So he's got a bachelor's degree in communications, but when he gave thought to being a police officer, he already had a full-time job. He didn't want to have to quit his full-time job to go through the police academy, which you still have to do to become fully certified. And so that's a 720-hour course. It's 18 weeks. And if you're not yet a police officer, many people will put themselves through that academy. They'll pay the tuition, and they'll go unpaid for that 18 weeks, like they do in college, and get certified to be a police officer before they get hired. And a lot of law enforcement agencies require you to do that 18 weeks prior to even applying to the police department. So we're a little different in that we don't require that 18-week program to be completed. And the reason that we do that is we want people who maybe have been in a different field for a while and are looking for something that's maybe a little more meaningful. And then we're able to get applicants that have more life experience, and maybe even in a totally different field, and come to us and say, hey, I'd like to be a police officer, but I don't have this police academy. So we'll hire them and we'll pay them their salary and we'll pay their tuition to go through the police academy. So that gives us the ability to have a much wider pool of applicants. And really, we in our entire hiring process, we don't ask any questions in interviews about what would you do in a life or death situation. How would you investigate a crash? How would you investigate a domestic violence incident? We don't ask those questions because we can teach anybody how to do those things. We ask questions around character. We ask them to describe times where they've been in really difficult situations that have tested their integrity. And so we ask a lot of questions around integrity, accountability, how to be professional, what does that look like? We'll ask them about concepts in policing, such as community policing, and what that might mean to them. We'll ask them about those types of things, but we want to get to the character of an individual. We want people who are excellent communicators. We want people of just that high integrity, and we can teach them how to be a cop. So first and foremost, we want those people of character. So that's really what we're looking for. So the tech program is certainly that we do go there and recruit, but we also go to career fairs at UW Platteville and UW Eau Claire, and those places to we go. Really, the feeder program, I would say, for us is our community service program. Our officers that are wearing yellow shirts and are down in the 400 block on Wednesday night concerts and those kinds of things. And we have about 12 of them that we hire each summer, and they're aspiring law enforcement officers. And we really get a good sense of who they are, how well they communicate and interact with people, how respectful they are. And that's really been a good program for us. Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Great
you.
answer.
Other questions for Ben?
Question regarding the life report. Life report, one of the calls to action was around diversity, inclusion, and belonging.
Jeff?
Yeah, I know. I always have this with Zoom. I don't know what it is.
I got life report and diversity inclusion on that. Yeah.
One of the calls to action was around that, and that the survey that was done indicated that people felt that there was a sense of not feeling a belonging in this community, not feeling included, a sense of this community is not inclusive, and that people were experiencing discrimination. From your perspective in law enforcement, do you see that play out in certain?
Well, so I had a little bit hard time at the end hearing what the full question was, Jeff. But I know that one of the outcomes of the life report is the importance of diversity and inclusion, and people aren't feeling that they're included in this community. And so I'm not sure exactly where that question was going, but in terms of law enforcement, I can talk about that a little bit from a recruitment standpoint, and then also from just how we engage with the community. So from a recruitment standpoint, diversity I think it's a really important thing for us. We've really tried for a long time, actually, to have a diverse workforce that reflects the demographics of our community. We say that we want, when you get our Christmas card, which shows the pictures of all of our staff, that if we show that to anybody in our community, hopefully you'll see somebody that looks like you in that Christmas card. And I think that's, it's not just so that we can say that we've done it. It's so that people feel comfortable coming to us whenever they have issues. There are unique issues within the Hmong community, for example. And so the fact that we have Hmong police officers who can speak their language and understand, the culture within the Hmong community, that's a really important thing. And not only can they come and talk to a Hmong police officer, but all of our police officers have a better understanding of the Hmong community because we have Hmong police officers that work for us. And inevitably we have conversations and we become friends. And so that builds in our understanding of different cultures within our community, and that's a really important thing. So that's from a recruiting retention standpoint. And then from, you know, kind of along the lines of the mayor's task force in regards to police race relations, you know, those are really critical things, especially today. And so, you know, we engage in things like the mayor's task force. You know, I've been part of a lot of, you know, conversations locally, you know, whether they're Zoom conversations and they're broadcast on Facebook or on a statewide level, you know, through NPR or what have you. And, you know, just being able to talk about the issues from a police perspective and encouraging people to, you know, to come and talk to us. If, you know, if there's anybody in our community, and it doesn't have to be about race, but if there's anybody in the community that wants to talk to me or our command staff or deputy chief about any issue they're experiencing, including how they feel about reporting crimes or things that have occurred to them within our community, you know, we'll give them the time and we will sit down and have those conversations. And in the last few months, those have been very time consuming. We've had a lot of those conversations, but they've been tremendously important, I think, for us in building relationships with people on an individual level and giving them comfort that if there is a hate crime that occurs to them that they're aware of, they are more likely to report to us. They're more likely to encourage others within their community to report to us. And it's really hard for us to do an investigation into a crime that we don't know about that isn't reported. So that's all about trust and how we go about our job. You know, we had back in June a hate crime that occurred that was we charged it out as a hate crime. It was a battery on the near west side at a gas station, and you know, we made that public because we wanted people in our community to know that we take those things seriously, and if they report things to us, we will investigate, and if we've determined a crime's been committed, we will take appropriate enforcement action, and those things won't be tolerated here. You know, then participating in things like the mayor's task force, you know, there are very difficult conversations that will come out of that task force, but we will be at the table for those conversations because it helps us build that trusting relationship with people in our community so that they know that they're supported by police. I don't know that means that they feel supported by our entire community, because that's, you know, the police aren't the community. The police are just a portion of, a component of the community. And we have a lot of work in our community to do around that. But as for the police department, we will be engaged in those conversations, and we will do our best to build those trusting relationships, which are really critical in today's world, where there's a huge divide, you know, and you know, politically there's a huge divide, but also just, you know, there's a lot of hate and discontent that in the land of social media, and people are much more willing to speak out and you know, say things that quite frankly they shouldn't be saying, that are just totally inappropriate. So I can understand why people don't necessarily feel comfortable.
Okay. Any last question for the chief?
I don't have a question, but I think you can see after speaking for close to 40 minutes, he is our esteemed police chief for Wausau.
There you go. You saved yourself, Rosemary, huh? All right. Well, thank you, Ben. I would agree. We appreciate all you do for our community. We appreciate you coming and taking the time to speak to the Rotary Club like this. Thank you very much. So
thank you. It's my pleasure to be in this position to serve this community. I love it here. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. So we'll close then with the four-way test. JB, feel like sending us off with the four-way test today? Thanks.
Sure. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Or will it be beneficial to all concerned?
All right. Thanks. Have a good week, everybody. We'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.